Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Refrigerant Checkup with Dr. Chuck. Today I'm going to be addressing a question I got around a term, parts per million. So we're going to talk about what it means, why it's important, where we see it in regards to refrigerants and our refrigerants industry, and anything else you need to know. So parts per million is a way of expressing a concentration or the quantity of something you're interested in as it relates to the total objects or the total system that you're looking at. One analogy we could use is the term percentage. We're all very familiar with how we use percentages as a part out of 100. So $5 is 5% of $100. We could say part per 100, 5 part per 100, but we don't usually use that term. We use parts per thousand, parts per million, parts per billion, trillion when we're looking at smaller and smaller quantities. So if I had 1,000,000 marbles in my marble collection and 6 of them were red, I would have 6 parts per million red marbles in my marble collection. So it's a very, very small quantity of part per million. It's about 1 inch out of 16 miles. So you think of the distance 16 miles straight ahead in your line, moving 1 inch, you'd be moving 1 part per million. It's about 1 minute out of around 2 years. 1 penny out of $10,000. In terms of concentration in the chemical world, if you were to take an envelope of sugar that you might put in your coffee and take about a half of that and dissolve that in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, that quantity of water, that will give you a concentration of about 1 part per million of sugar in water. So why is this important in the refrigerants industry? Why is it important to people doing refrigeration, HVACR work? A couple places we see it. One, in terms of specifying purity of refrigerants. The AHRI 700 spec has a list of impurities and maximum levels. A lot of those are given in parts per million. For example, 10 parts per million is the maximum allowable quantity of moisture or water in typical refrigerants. So that's not a lot of water. And why don't we want water in our systems? One, I refer you back to one of my earlier videos when I get into the lubricant chemistry and how water can actually catalyze the decomposition of polyol ester lubricants, breaking them back down into constituent alcohols and acids. And once we get some acid generated in a system, then we have corrosion. We have attack on materials, motor windings, plastics, elastomers. So it's very, very important that we control moisture through our good practices, good filter dryer changeouts when we need to, pull in good vacuum, all these best practices we always do. But again, that part per million level, 10 parts per million in moisture, is very important, and it's important we follow that. Even though it's an extremely low level, we need to maintain that to maintain the quality of our systems and keep them running for their full useful lifetime. One other place we may see parts per million values regarding refrigerants is in occupational exposure limits or workplace exposure limits. How much refrigerant vapor can people be exposed to before it becomes a dangerous situation? So organizations put out different values. You see them sometimes as OELs, occupational exposure levels, sometimes TLVs, PELs, wheels, all these basically the same way, understanding the toxicology of the chemical, and then setting a limit so that workers, which are assumed to be healthy individuals since they're up and going to work every day, what's the maximum level we can have that and assure a safe workplace for workers. So you may see things like ammonia, which is very toxic, has an occupational exposure limit of 25 parts per million. Pretty low. Things like 410A around 1,000 parts per million. So again, these vary depending on refrigerant, but again, you'll see those values in parts per million levels going forward. So I hope that helps you understand, parts per million, it's a little bit of a weird thing if you're not used to it, but if you think of percents as being parts per 100, everything else kind of follows logically after that. Thanks so much for sending in that question. It's something we talk about all the time, but sometimes we don't take a minute to explain it to someone who's new or someone who may not use it every day. Please keep your questions coming in. Thanks for your business. Thanks for your support. Please stay safe out there and have a great day. So long.